Okay, we'll be starting on Chapter 5, the political parties, and there's two parts to this lecture, and this is part 1 of that lecture on political parties, Chapter 5. So the learning objectives for this part of the lecture is that we're going to be defining political parties. So everybody knows what we're talking about. We're going to be talking about what they're supposed to be doing. We're going to be talking about some of the characteristics of, what it's part of the definition, like what kind of characteristics do parties have that kind of falls into the functions of what they should be doing. We're going to be talking about party affiliation and what Texas looks like in terms of affiliating with a party, in terms of, how many are Democrats, how many are Republicans, how many actually affiliate with either party. And then we're going to start talking about ideologies. Okay, so if you ask me, and if you ask the constitutional framers of the Constitution, because we're talking about political parties more within American government. And so I'll bring it down to the Texas part in the next part of the lecture, but this one is going to be more like how American government views political parties. So back in the olden days when the U.S. Constitution was being framed, they did not believe it was a very good idea to have political parties. And they said, if we have, and that at that time they didn't call them political parties, they called them factions. And they said, if we have factions, we think that it might undermine the consensus building process in public policy making. Okay, so what that means is this. If you have people that are going to be very partisan in the way that they look at things, it's going to be there's going to be too much conflict in order to try to come together as a nation and to get laws passed. It's going to undermine the consensus building or the ability to compromise and to get people to decide on what's going to be best for the country when you make laws or public policy. So the definition then of a political party is a broad-based coalition of interests whose primary purpose is to win elections, to build majorities, and to link people and government. All right, so to win elections, yes, they're going to run a candidate from a party, and we'll talk about that in the next chapter. It's actually chapter 4, but I'm covering this part first. Um, I guess you can listen to it whichever way you want. But anyway, so the party will run somebody to have their particular candidate from their particular party win the election. They will try to build majorities. They will try to unite those people that are within a particular party to support the platform, to support the position of what that party represents. And they will try to link people and government. So it's we the people. This is the government of we the people. And so we have a government. And so the government is over their institutions. And we're going to be talking about the political institutions as it applies for Texas. But at the American level, there's institutions also. And so the parties will try to link people and government and to explain what they're trying to do, what government does, and how it affects their constituents, the people that belong to that particular party. Okay, then, so some of the functions of political parties are to nominate and elect party members, to simplify the issues and educate the public. So let me talk a little bit about these. Okay, so whenever there's going to be an election, there's going to be some, it's changed quite a bit. Back in the olden days when I was, youngish, and I'll be watching the party conventions, and they were kind of interesting at that point because you didn't really know who was going to be running from a particular party until the electors, I mean the people like the delegates that whenever we vote in a primary, there's people that kind of pledge their support, but we don't really know who was, or at that time we didn't really know who was going to be the person that was going to be nominated from that party to run in the general election, which is when the president is elected. And so it was kind of interesting. It was kind of exciting. The state of Texas pledges its delegates to the great whatever George W. Bush whatever. But anyway, so that's kind of the way that it was set up. So they will find a candidate and they will run the candidate and they will fund the candidate. In the recent elections that we've had, this was in the 2020 election and the 2016 election, there was an independent that was running from the Democratic Party, and that particular independent was Bernie Sanders. And he was very upset because he felt that the Democratic Party was not being supportive of him, even though he was running as a Democrat. And the thing is this, he serves in the Senate, but he was not elected from the Democratic Party or as a Democrat. He was elected as an independent. He joined the Democratic Party only to run as president. So in a way, you can say, well, if he didn't play by the rules of the Democratic Party to start with and expects the funding, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just giving you an example of that. They said, the Democratic Party is supporting this particular person or they're supporting that particular person because they've been a true Democrat for a long time. The same thing with the Republican Party. When Donald Trump ran, in 2016, there were a lot of people that or candidates that the party preferred over Donald Trump because they felt that they were part of the Republican establishment of they represented the Republican ideals, and we're going to be talking about ideology of what the Republican Party should stand for. But anyway, so the Republican Party did not particularly support Donald Trump, but Donald Trump just said, "Well, he goes, I don't need your money," and basically that's what it comes down to. When I say support, are they going to throw their money behind them and help them get elected? Okay, to simplify the issues and to educate the public, well, what that basically means is that there's a lot of things going on. And so the thing is, when these candidates are campaigning, we don't always know exactly, what that candidate stands for. And the best way to be able to figure out what it is that a particular party stands for is to get into the party platform. So y'all are going to be doing a short paper about looking at the party platforms, and more on that later. Okay, another thing that the political party should be doing, that they should be mobilizing the voters. And that's just basically saying they need to get the people in that particular party excited about voting for a particular candidate. They need to go out and help do the campaigning. They need to be doing the canvassing and the telephoning. They need to get the voters out. They need to get the voters out to vote. People always ask me or anyone who's going to win the election. My answer is depends on who comes out to vote. It always depends on who comes out to vote. Uh, the Republican Party is better organized in a lot of ways, so they're able to mobilize their voters to go out to vote much more so than the Democratic Party is. Okay, and basically they want anybody that's going to be running under their party label, that's going to be affiliated with their party label, to push the position of the party. And again, the position of the party is found in the party platforms. Okay, some of the characteristics of American political parties. Well, there's many, but I'm not going to cover too many. The first one I want to talk about is that they tend to be pragmatic. And so what that pragmatism means is that they tend to be practical. Or I should say, historically, they have been practical. And so what this means that in the past, and again, this is not like a new thing. This has been going on probably since the mid-90s, where it's become so partisan. Told you I'm going to be using that word a lot. So partisan. There's not much compromise going on in any legislative branch, whether it be at the national level or any of the state levels, that everything is very partisan. They don't kind of like cross the aisles. They don't work with each other. And so basically, not a whole lot is getting done in the state of Texas or in the country. Now, this pragmatic position also says we will support any kind of clear-cut position issues that we find that there's going to be consensus, and usually, within the party for sure, but if there's going to be consensus within a particular political institution, such as the House of Representatives or such as the legislature, whatever. And they do tend to shy away from hot topic issues because they say we're not exactly sure that there's a lot of support, and because and if there's not a lot of support, they don't want to be to offend their constituents in some way. Okay, so basically this is what I'm saying. They need to be able to satisfy their traditional supporters, and that's called the party base. And so what this means is that these are people that will vote for a candidate from that party regardless. Usually it's regardless. So they are the voters for sure. They have public opinion polls that are, done, especially as we're getting into an election season, any election season, but particularly the general election when the president is elected. There's all kinds of public opinion polls that are out there that are looking at different types of issues and see what people feel about this issue or that issue, what they're going to support or what they're not going to support. And so they're not going to, so the people that are running for office and especially the legislature are not going to go against that, the political will of the people. They also need, we haven't talked, and we're not going to cover interest groups, but interest groups are basically a coalition of people that feel strongly about a particular issue area. And the best example I can give you of that is like the National Rifle Association, the NRA. And they tend to be very strong. They tend to have a lot of influence, and they tend to provide a lot of campaign funding, campaign contributions. That's that last one. They tend to give money to candidates. And so then the question is, well, are they really buying votes? I'm not going to say yes. I'm not going to say no. For example, the NRA, they will contribute to both because they're hedging their bets, but they definitely contribute more to the Republican Party than they do to the Democratic Party. But they also do contribute to the Democratic Party as well. Okay, another characteristic is that they tend to be decentralized. And so what that means is that we do have a national party, whether it be Democrat or Republican at the national level. We have one at the state level, and then we have one at the grassroots level, the lowest level, and it's usually the county. It's the county chair for this and the county chair for that that will handle whatever elections that are going to be coming up that are run based on party affiliation. So let me tell you this right now. There's only one type of election that is not based on party affiliation, that is nonpartisan, and that's the local government, and that's city council, and the mayor. We don't, well, I know what they are, but most people would not know what they are because they're not running as a Democrat or they're not running as a Republican. But at the county level, we have like different little units, little jurisdictions, political jurisdictions. And so the little jurisdictions have like there's a county chair for each party, but then there's also people that run that particular area, that precinct chair. That's what they're called. And so these are the ones that will do, as I said, not so much cities. Some cities do, but not in Texas. The county, yes, we have a county judge. We'll talk about the county judge later. But he's kind of like the mayor, but he runs the county. And so we have county commissioners. I mean, yeah, most people are not very familiar with the way that the county is run, but it's called the commissioner's court. And so it's a county judge, which is kind of like the mayor, and there's like the county commissioners, and there's four of them, and they're like the city council members, but they're for the county. So anyway, so that's the county chair, and then the district courts, or the different courts that they have that where they're going to be running for election. They will run based on party labels as well, party affiliations as well. Now at the state level, then they will handle all of the state level people that are running, the candidates that are going to be running, and that includes the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the railroad commissioners, the comptroller of public accounts, the general landlord. So we call this the plural executive. I talked a little bit about the plural executive when I talked about the Texas Constitution. Well, that's basically what it's saying. The party will come in and say, this is who we want to run, for this particular position, or this is the person that we want to run, and we're going to go ahead and give that person our support. We will endorse that person, but we'll also give them campaign funding, that kind of thing, strategize with them. And then at the national level, the party will, as I was talking about a little while ago, they will identify and they will support and endorse the president, vice president, congressmen, U.S. senators, those that are at the national level. And these are the ones that you would be the most familiar with, or at least that you may have heard of or not. All right, so what do they do then? Okay, so this is what I'm saying. They will recruit the candidates. They will do campaign fundraising. They will have these dinners. The Republican Party will have like maybe $5,000 plate dinners. Well, the Democrats don't have that kind of money. They do like car washes. I don't know. But anyway, so they will try to raise money for the candidates or whatever to fund their campaigns. They'll plan the strategies, and the strategies are actually even in a way even like more important because this, you know, Texas is known to be a red state, and I'll show you some information about that. But it's a red state because the Republicans are the ones that come out to vote at the, almost uniformly at a higher rate than the Democrats. Does that mean that Texas does not have Democrats? That means that the Democratic Party is not good at getting their people out to vote. And again, I'll give you some percentages that are going to be supporting what I'm telling you. Okay, so because especially the national candidates, they say, well, Texas is going to vote Republican, so why even bother to go to Texas? So this is their strategy. They're going to spend their money on these swing states, these purple states that they could go either way. They're going to go there. So I think it would be so great for Texas to be a purple state, so that at least we could get some attention from these politicians that never even pay attention to us because they just blow us off. They say they're going to vote Republican, so we don't care about them. They just want our money, our campaign money. Okay, so this last one, policy orientations, and that just basically says if you are a candidate that's going to be running as a Democrat or as a Republican or whatever, you need to be promoting the values that we have. You need to be promoting the issues that we think are important. So whoever's going to be running under their party label, that in the past that has been pretty important, pretty important. We'll see how it's going to come out in the future elections. All right, so when I talked about the Texas Constitution, I told you at that time that Texas was a one-party state and it was a Democratic Party state, and this is because of that E.J. Davis fiasco that we had, that so much power was centralized in him, and he messed things up, and he was just such a tyrant, he was corrupt, etc., that they said we're not going to vote for Republican again in a long time, and they didn't for a very long time. So from 1869 to 1973, that's when another Republican was elected. So historically, Texas has been a Democratic Party state, and so people that are running from the governor or for the legislature usually are Democrats. Okay, up to this point, as Texas was a one-party state, but things started to change, and these changes started to happen in the 1990s. All of a sudden, more Republicans were being voted into office, into state office. And so it was a trend that we saw that started in the 90s and it lasted for another about maybe 10 years or 12 years when and Texas was all of a sudden becoming a more competitive state, more of a two-party state. So let me show you some figures of what I'm talking about. Okay, so if you look at this, the title of this particular slide is Changes in the Number of Republican and Democratic Office Holders in the State of Texas. So from 1973, there were 132 Democrats that held office in 1973 in the Democratic Party and only 17 Republicans. Then by 2019, there were 67 Democrats in the House of Representatives and 83 Republicans. So you see that shift. I mean, there's more Republicans in the House now. Well, what about the Texas Senate? Okay, it's 1973, there were 28 Democrats and only 3 Republicans. 2019, 12 Democrats, 19 Republicans. What about the U.S. House of Representatives? Okay, 1973, 20 were Democrats, 4 were Republicans. 2019, 13 Democrats, 23 Republicans. U.S. Senate, it was 1 and 1. Now we have, as of 2019, we have 0 Democrats in the U.S. Senate, and both of our U.S. senators are Republican. So this is telling you, yes, it shifted. Yes, it shifted. More Republicans were being voted in to office, as of, from 1973 to 2019. So that's kind of the way that it is right now. Okay, so I'm really only talking about 2 parties. There's a couple of other parties, but like the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, but I'm really going to be concentrating on the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And so a lot of times the people want to say that are going to be running from these third parties, such as the Green Party or the Libertarian Party, they do have like a slate where they can run their candidate, but they don't have a very good chance of getting elected, because they don't have the institutional mechanisms built in to provide the funding, to provide the exposure, to provide the support that's needed to an election. And then when it comes to independents, or these people called independents, we do have some independents that are elected, but it makes them really hard, especially when it comes to like the primaries, because the parties that run the primaries. But these independents, and this is kind of what I was telling you about Bernie Sanders, who's an independent, just the structure of the party system makes it difficult for them to be funded and to win, because the party is very reluctant to support an independent who's never wanted to affiliate with either party, whether it be a Democrat or whether it be a Republican. That's just the way the parties are set up. So a lot of times when you hear these things on the, these complaints on the campaign trail, it's rhetoric. It's just campaign rhetoric. They're trying to make themselves the victim. Okay, we're going to start talking about ideologies. And so ideologies we define as a belief system that we have, and I talked about it in terms of political socialization, that it comes from your family, your churches, your schools, your community. So that's kind of like what I'm going to be talking about, the ideological basis of factionalism. Okay, so if you're conservative, some of the different characteristics that you might have being a conservative is that you believe very strongly in being a free market, capitalism, a free market, and that you don't have a lot of government regulation in the economy, or actually in your life. But Texans are kind of like that in general. We don't like to have a lot of government regulation in our lives, regardless of what party you affiliate with. But that's just kind of like the way, this is the more at the national level. Okay, they will support government involvement if there's going to be something that's going to give them like a tax break or some kind of a tax cut or some type of a tax incentive to promote their businesses. Uh, the ones that really like this the most are like the petroleum industry. I mean, Corpus Christi is heavily into the petroleum industry. They really love to have any kind of tax cuts or tax incentives that the government can provide, but don't they do not want them to be they do not want to be burdened with more taxes than what they feel that they should pay. We see that play out quite a bit in the property taxes that we'll talk about when we talk about local government. But these big refineries that we have, they don't pay hardly any taxes because there is a loophole that the state allows for them to pay very few taxes. Very few taxes. I'll talk about that later. Conservatives also tend to oppose any kind of government programs, and especially welfare or any kind of health care, because they think that they call it a redistribution of wealth. And I'm not saying that they're wrong, and I'm not saying that they're right, but this is their thinking behind it, their reasoning behind it. They're saying, well, because they feel conservatives feel that people should pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, that these welfare programs should not be available to anyone, that they should not depend on government to provide any kind of safety net. Okay, so you need to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Okay, when it comes to healthcare assistance, one of the reasons that the Republicans, have been trying to repeal and replace the Obamacare, which is still in existence, and I mean it has not been done because it's very difficult to dismantle. But they're saying they call it that is socialized medicine. I'm not going to say that it is socialized medicine. I'm saying that when it was initially set up, it was set up so that there could be a subsidy if you couldn't afford your own insurance. Then the government would help you pay for the insurance. That they would have exchanges, like healthcare exchanges, insurance exchanges where you could buy insurance. And the insurance is not cheap. I mean, no insurance is cheap. And so what they were trying to do is they were trying to get a lot of people together to say if we have like a group of people in an exchange, we'll have more healthcare providers provide insurance at a lower rate. It has had some success, and I would say it's more successful than what it's given credit for. I'm not saying that it's perfect. I'm not saying that there's not problems with it, but should we get rid of it? I don't think we should get rid of it. And this is just me. I don't think we should get rid of it because we don't have anything else to replace it. The Republican Party has not been able to come up with anything better to replace it. Okay, so some of the issues that conservatives will emphasize are traditional and family values and interpret that as mom, dad, 2.3 kids, a dog, a cat, and a white picket fence. the traditional family. They will also emphasize close communities. And so what that means is that, you know what, that if you are having problems, you go to your family, you go to your church, you go to your community. Do not go to the government and ask for a handout. That's what they're saying. You need to just keep it within, the borders of within your own little village, I guess you could say. They also tend to be conservatives also tend to be strong on law and order issues. Stringent laws, more stringent laws for certain types of offenses. And conservatives also tend to be tougher on public safety issues, public safety and public order issues, I should say. So basically, they say, well, we think that there should be stiffer penalties for criminals, and conservatives tend to favor capital punishment, which is being put to death for certain types of crimes. I'll talk about that when we talk about like what Texas considers capital punishment. But I have to say, in the state of Texas, capital punishment doesn't seem to be an issue for anybody because we've been doing it for so long. It's kind of like a given, something that we accepted in our society. Whereas other states that do not have capital punishment, they still see it as being something barbaric. So I don't know, maybe we're just barbaric. I don't know. Anyway, they say that there might need to be government action to promote moral values, legislating morality, that's what they call it. Let me give you an example of this one. When George W. Bush was president, what he wanted to do is that he wanted to address this issue to promote moral values, and so he instituted a pilot program, which is kind of like it wasn't very widespread. It was just in certain areas of the United States, and he said that he would give $5,000 to welfare mothers if they married the father's child. But nobody wanted to take him up on that. And so when they were asking them, they were holding focus groups saying, well, how come you didn't take advantage of this? And so their particular answer was, well, he can father my children, but I don't want him as a husband. So there you go. All right, now we're going to be moving on to liberals. And so uh, liberals will say that not everybody was born within the same socioeconomic status. And because they were not born within the same socioeconomic status, there are institutional barriers to succeed. And so the government may need to step in to remove some of those institutional barriers. Okay, so what the liberal ideology says or promotes government regulation in the economy. And so saying, well, if the economy is not doing well, then the government does need to step in, and the government needs to provide the engine of economic growth to kickstart the economy again. That's known as fiscal economics or Keynesian economics. The government gets involved to provide jobs, to provide money, to provide stimulus packages, to provide bailout money, and that has happened in the past. And this happened under Republican governors, not or Republican presidents, not Democratic presidents. Well, yes, Democratic presidents too, but Republican presidents as well. If you're a liberal, you say we think that the people that are disadvantaged economically and socially disadvantaged need to be protected in some way in order to promote equality, in order for people to be able to do better in life. And the way that that can be done is to provide social welfare programs. Now, these social welfare programs may be associated with welfare, they may be associated with health care, they may be associated with education, because you'll have to know that education is like the best equalizer, because education promotes economic mobility and at some point social mobility, but definitely economic mobility. Okay, and having said this, liberals will also favor more progressive taxes. And progressive taxes means that the more you make, the more you pay in taxes. And that's actually the way that our income system is set up. But in practice, that's not the way that it works. Because it seems to me, and not only to me, I mean, this is what the literature says, that the more you make, the less taxes that you pay, percentage-wise, your net tax rate. The less you pay, because you get to take all of these deductions and all of these exemptions, more so than if you are middle class. Right. If you're very poor, you're kind of covered in that way, and it's called the earned income credit. If you're very rich, you have all kinds of tax breaks. The people that are getting squeezed right now, the ones that are carrying the tax burden, is the middle class. Many things have been taken away, especially with this last income tax reform that was passed in 2017, I think. Uh, the middle class doesn't have deductions anymore. We have no deductions. Middle class has no deductions. If you are of the liberal persuasion, you tend to be more optimistic about human nature because they're saying, if the programs are provided, if the opportunities are provided, people will take advantage of them and they'll do better, that they will do better. So it's provide the opportunity. So liberals saying provide the opportunity. That's kind of like the buzzword for the liberals. Okay, this thing called civil rights and civil liberties. Let me talk a little bit about that one. Civil rights means we do not discriminate against race, color, creed, national origin, age. Okay, so all of that. So we need to protect minorities. We need to protect women. We need to protect those that are in these disadvantaged or protected groups. Civil liberties is a little bit different. Civil liberties deals with your constitutional rights, and these are like your freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to own a gun, and your First Amendment, Second Amendment. That's what civil liberties is. So when it's saying, when I say our when Democrats are saying civil liberties should not be compromised, what they're saying is that people should have the right to free speech. People should have the right to freedom of religion. People should have, or the press should have a right not to be censored in what they're saying or what they're trying to say, because they do play a function in society. They play a function in government. They are that link, and a lot of times they're called the fifth estate. They're the link that tells that plays that watchdog function about what government is doing or what they should be doing and what they're not doing. So these are protect these rights. Protect these rights. That's part of our democracy, guys. Okay, people that are liberals tend okay, this is kind of what I was talking about. They say they tend to not want to have any type of laws that are going to interfere with your First Amendment rights, like your constitutional rights, which is the freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. These are the First Amendment rights. They're saying, do not mess with us. Do not mess with these. Again, these are the things that define our democracy. Because when there is, I see some countries, and especially like the Latin American countries, where they were democracies, not as strong a democracy as ours, but I mean they were, pretty strong democracies, and all of a sudden they elect these authoritarian type of presidents, and all of a sudden they see their free speech. The first thing they see is the press and TV. They're gone. It's only the state-run stuff. Then their speech is affected. They can practice religion most of the time. Uh, these like manifestations, freedom of assembly, like the protest marches, they will come and they will gas them and they'll kill them. So I mean, so all of these things, I mean, we should hold that to be near and dear to us as U.S. citizens, because this is what defines us as being like the best democracy in the world, and we really need to keep that. Liberals tend to be suspicious of trying to legislate morality, which is the story I was telling you about George W. Bush. And so they're saying, well, what we see is when you're trying to legislate what people are doing, like you need to marry the father of your children, well, they're interfering with the person's individual rights. No one can tell you who you need to marry or not marry, at least not in this country. In other countries, maybe, not in this country. Okay, let me show you this particular slide right here. Okay, this is a percentage of voters indicating a major party identification. So look, in 1952, you saw that the Democrats were definitely had a higher percentage than Republicans, and you had 72% of the voting electorate that was actually identifying with the party. Okay, 1972, the percentage was close to the same, but it was already starting to shift a little bit. 57 Democrats, 14% Republican. By the 1990s, it was look almost even, guys, but there was a decline of party identification to 64%. But the Democrats and the Republicans were kind of more or less within, an even range there. 2002, this is where the big shift came in. 2002, you see that there are a lot more people, a percentage of voters that are identifying with the Republican Party than with the Democratic Party, but you're starting to see a decrease in the total people of that identify with parties as it is. Then by 2008, again, it was almost an even split, 35% Democrat, 36% Republicans, and the percentage increased. More people were starting to identify with the party. By 2016, this was like the last general election that we had, and these are all based on general elections, guys. The last general election, again, it was almost pretty evenly split 33% Democrats, 35% Republicans, and 68% were identifying with a political party. And then the last midterm election that was in 2018. Again, 31%, a few more Democrats, but a few more Republicans, with 31 to 34. But again, it's kind of within the same range. It's not a whole lot different. But again, there's been a decline in party identifiers, people that are identifying with a particular party. So anyway, I just thought this was an interesting table because this is what it's telling me. It's saying uh, there's not that many Republicans. It's not like 2002 where there was such a dramatic difference between them. It's almost the same. So again, when people say who is going to win the election, I always say depends on who comes out to vote. Hey, they got a 50-50 chance, almost a 50-50 chance.